You know, I love a good challenge. But looking back at this Seiko Monaco, I have to ask myself, what the hell was I thinking? Hello, and welcome back to the Watchmaker Studio. In my lesson today, we're restoring the Seiko 7016-5011, better known to collectors as the Seiko Monaco. And this one arrives looking like it's been through several decades of character development. Now, to be clear, I knew this was going to be a project. You do not buy a watch in this condition because you think it's going to be a quick service and light polish. You buy it because underneath all this damage is one of Seiko's coolest vintage chronographs. And because apparently every now and then I like to test the limits of my own patience. Anyway, I digress. The crystal's badly scratched. The dial is ruined. The case has lost a lot of the sharp geometry that kind of makes its design work, and the movement is not even attempting to run. So I already know this watch needs serious work. This is fine. Everything is fine. So just testing the hands here, making sure that at least that's working, and then I'll take the hands off so we can get into the case. Now the first step is getting the movement out of the case so we can see exactly what we're dealing with. Now this case is a solid body and the movement comes out of the front. So I can't get to the stem release mechanism from the back. So this movement has a stem release lever that you press down through this space here on the side of the dial. You press the stem release, pull the stem, and the movement comes right out. So let's do that. That's odd. The stem release is not where I expect it to be. Maybe I'm just missing it. Let me look from another angle here. No, it's definitely not there. Well, that's a problem. Because if I can't release the stem, I can't get it out. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to hold down the cannon pinion, put it in setting mode, and then I'm going to see if I can hold the cannon pinion and unscrew. Yep, it unscrewed. Okay, all right. So now that I take the crown off, I should be able to get it out even with the stem in there. There we go. All right. Okay, we can keep going. Crisis averted. Well, yeah, look at that. There's the setting lever, but it looks a lot shorter than it should be. Normally it protrudes out, so you can easily press it through that gap. So something's going on. I'll take a closer look once I pull it apart here. So let me get the dial off. This has these eccentric screws, so they don't actually screw out. They just turn, and then you can pry the dial off. Now, the Seiko 7016 is a compact automatic chronograph movement with a day and date display. So there's quite a lot packed into small space here. It makes it interesting. It also means there are plenty of places for things to go wrong. So as I start taking parts off, some of the damage is pretty obvious. The dial, it's not patina, that's damage. The date dial, day disc are also going to need to be replaced. You can see the wear on the numbers is pretty much gone. And inside the movement, I'm already seeing a few things that are going to need a much closer look once everything is apart and cleaned. So let's take off the oscillating weight here for the automatic. Yeah, that a little harder than it should be, so hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. Now I have this cool set of old Seiko movement holders. I'm going to go with 70 there for 7016. and it holds the movement actually pretty nicely. Okay, let's get this date finger off of here. Okay, just put that anywhere. That's fine. Let's take off this cover here with the date wheel attached. Yeah, you can see the numbers are just gone. There's take the hour wheel off, the date jumper, and the date corrector spring here. The intermediate hour wheel, and then we're going to get the setting lever spring, which just sprung away, and then the setting lever. And the yoke, which is interesting, it's quite a long, it's a yoke and the yoke spring together. Get the stem out of here, along with the clutch wheel, and this is interesting. Well, there is our answer. Half of the lever for unlocking the stem is still here. The other half's gone. Apparently Russ decided I only needed 50% of that part. That is suboptimal. The problem is this is not a part I can just order. But before we deal with that, I need to finish the teardown and get a better look at everything. Take off the Canon pinion with my Canon pinion remover. And this is the intermediate hour recording wheel axle, which is apparently stuck to the recording wheel on the other side. So we'll just leave it there for now. And then as we take the intermediate hour recording wheel off of the other side, it should just fall off. All right, and here we have a reverse threaded screw for the second reversing wheel. And then we're going to let the power out of the mainspring, what's left of it, because it never ran. Just move the click out of the way and carefully unscrew the mainspring. All right, take off the ratchet wheel here. And this little clip is called the holder of barrel and train wheel bridge. It's quite a name. All right, let's take the train bridge off. Overall, the movement's pretty dirty. There's corrosion on a few parts like this one. But I'll try to save as much as I can. But some parts I'm just going to have to replace. That's okay, I expected that. Now this part I'm worried about. The chronograph wheel. They're hard to find, and if you find them, they're expensive. That one looks dirty, but I think it's okay. I think it's going to be all right. If it's out of shape in any way, you got to replace it. And like I said, they can get pretty pricey. All right, let's take the balance wheel off of here, balance cock, and see. Make sure the hairspring's okay. Looks to be okay. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there seems to be some sort of staining. It looks almost like oil slick, but it's not oily. It's some sort of stain, liquid stain. I'm not sure. We'll see how it comes out after we go through the cleaning machine. Yeah, you can see that. So discoloration on the plates. This is the third wheel. And this is the minute recording wheel. Yeah, dirty. Some corrosion. We'll see. I'll try to polish all these up. And this is the intermediate hour recording wheel that was holding that other part on the other side. Escape wheel. Barrel. Definitely going to change out the mainspring. We'll take off the center wheel bridge and then get the center wheel out of here. And that center wheel, yeah, you can see the center wheel has corrosion in the pinion. I think that one's going to have to get replaced. Looks damaged. All right. And then this is the pallet fork bridge, and the pallet fork. All right, let's get the pawl lever and the first reduction wheel off. This is the clip that holds the first reduction wheel and the pawl lever onto the automatic bridge here. That pawl lever looks like it's seen better days. Now, we definitely want to peg all of the jewels. We want to make sure that we're getting any old oil, crusted old oil, and any dirt off those before we put anything into the cleaning machine. And then I'm going to pre-clean everything. Because before anything goes in the cleaning machine, I want to do a preliminary clean and inspection. Old oil and dirt can hide a lot. And with a movement like this, I need to know which parts can be saved and which ones are done. At this point, the replacement list is already getting a little uncomfortable. And one part on that list does not exist anywhere I can find. Now, I'm using this to remove the case tube. That's actually for the stem. I already took out the ones for the chronograph. And then just give a little bit of cleaning to the case. And if you enjoy this kind of deep dive restoration, consider subscribing because this one's about to get a lot more interesting. So here's what needs to be replaced. Dial, date disc, hammer with hour spring, center wheel, third wheel, escape wheel, pawl lever, lever for unlocking stem. And most of these parts eventually arrive from different parts of the world. There's just one problem. One of them never shows up because I can't find one anywhere. So I guess I'm going to have to make it. The lever for the unlocking stem has literally rusted in half. Normally, that would be a serious problem. In this case, I got lucky. I have another Seiko 71016 in for repair, and the lever from that movement gives me exactly what I need, a pattern. So first, I use good lever to mark the shape onto a piece of stainless steel sheet using my homemade metal scribe that I turned. And the rough cut actually happens off camera with a Dremel and a cutting wheel. So now I attach the good sample lever to the rough blank with basically double stick tape and use it as a guide while I bring this new part to shape. Now the new lever has to fit inside the movement, interact with the stem release mechanism, and move freely without catching on anything around it. No pressure. So this becomes a process of filing the stainless steel closer and closer to the shape of the sample part. Checking the profile, realizing I was slightly too optimistic, and then going back to make another tiny adjustment. Once the shape is close, I remove the new piece from the sample lever, and now the thickness needs to come down. So I'll start by rubbing it on an India stone until it is close to the thickness of the original part. Then I move to the polishing tool I normally use for screws. I have a brass cement chuck for this tool, so I attach the part with shellac, then lap it flat on a piece of glass with lapping paper. That gets the surface flat, smooth, and much closer to the finish I want. Finally, lightly bevel the edge. Not enough to change the shape, just enough to remove the sharp edges and make it look like a finished watch part instead of a tiny piece of sheet metal that has been through a stressful afternoon. And for a brief moment, it looks like the biggest problem might be behind us. That was a nice moment. It did not last very long. Now, without that jewel, the third wheel is not properly supported. It would just basically lie there on top of the neighboring wheels like my dog. The watch never had a chance of running like that. Now, the obvious answer is install a jewel. But of course, it's not quite that simple. We need two dimensions to be right. The hole through the jewel has to fit the third wheel pivot, and the outside diameter of the jewel has to fit securely in a plate. I'll use this pivot gauge to figure out which is the right hole for the job. Looks like the pivot needs a jewel with a 0.16 millimeter hole. Now we need to figure out the hole in the plate. Let's see what size we're working with. Now the reamers on my site's jeweling tool come in standard jewel sizes. So we'll start with 0.89 millimeter, and that's too big. So that's not the right size. So let's go down one. Let's do 0.79. And that one goes right through. Not helpful. So that puts the hole almost perfectly between two standard jewel sizes, which is about as inconvenient as it could possibly be. And it makes me wonder if that is why the original jewel disappeared in the first place. If I install a standard size 80 jewel, there's a good chance it will be too loose and may eventually fall out again. So instead, I'm going to ream the plate to 0.89 millimeters and install a size 90 jewel with the correct 0.16 hole for the pivot. That'll give us the proper press fit and actually support the third wheel the way it should. I'll use beveling tool to bevel the edges of the reamed hole to clean out any of the rough edges of the hole. So then we'll take the new size 1690 jewel and put it in place with the Horia jeweling tool. So now that we have the new jewel in place, let's test it. It's a little tight. That's why I need to adjust for endshake, because you can see the third wheel is not moving up or down at all, and that's not good. So that gives us a proper press fit and actually supports the third wheel the way it should. Now the train can finally turn correctly, and for the first time the movement comes to life. Now we're getting somewhere, I think. Now the movement is running now, but it's still not running the way I want. And the next thing I notice is a hairspring. It's just not sitting right. Before touching anything, I want to figure out what kind of problem it actually is. So I'm going to take the balance wheel off of the balance cock to make sure that I can actually see the hairspring on its own. So the coils themselves look flat, but look closely. The whole spring is tilted. And that usually means the problem is where the hairspring attaches to the collet. So let's see if a tiny adjustment there solves it. Oh yeah, that's much better. You know, sometimes experience saves you from creating a much bigger problem. Because if I had started bending the coils first, I probably would have spent the next couple of hours fixing a problem that wasn't actually there. And I already have enough problems to deal with. I don't need to add more. Okay. So it's running, but it's still not there. It's still sluggish. So we just keep looking. So it looks like our next problem here is the barrel. There's too much side shake here. The barrel's tilting more than it should, which could lead to the barrel rubbing on the plate or the bridge, killing our amplitude. That side shake means the bearing holes in the plate and the barrel are worn. So the goal is not to replace the plate or bridge, let's just restore the fit. The good news is they don't look ovaled. If that was the case, then this would be a little tougher. But this we can fix with the staking set. Using the staking set, I'm going to close the holes until they're actually a little too tight for the barrel arbor to turn freely. I know that sounds backwards, but it gives me room to sneak up on the final fit. Once the holes are closed, I can use smoothing broaches to gradually open them back up while leaving a clean, smooth surface. And then I'll use this beveling tool to lightly chamfer the edges of the hole so there are no rough edges left behind. Now the barrel turns freely, but the extra side shake is gone. That's another source of lost energy corrected. I also noticed that the lower jewel for the escape wheel is not sitting flat in the main plate. This is a quick correction, but it matters. Using the Hoya jeweling tool, I can level the jewel and adjust its depth to reduce the escape wheel end shake at the same time. Small correction, important result. Now that the escape wheel is sitting correctly, we can look at how it engages with the pallet fork, and that's not quite right either. The feet of the escape wheel are almost to the top of the pallet stone face. They should be closer to the middle. Fortunately, this adjustment is fairly straightforward with the Hoya tool. By changing the depth of the pallet fork pinion, I can bring the escape wheel teeth back to the correct position on the pallet stone. So now the engagement height is correct, but the escapement is not finished with us yet. Now drop lock is where the tooth of the escape wheel engages with the pallet stone. Proper drop lock is usually around 1/6 of the width of the pallet stone face. This is closer to half. That means every time the escape wheel unlocks, it is traveling farther than it needs to across the pallet stone, and that is energy the balance never gets. So now we need to move the entry pallet stone. This is not a push it until it looks better kind of adjustment. The pallet fork goes into this brass adjustment tool, which locks it in place and uses a lever with a dial indicator to measure movement in hundredths of a millimeter. The pallet stones are held in place with shellac, so first we need to soften the shellac with heat. For that, I'm using a Burgeon 30460 electric heater. The adjustment tool is brass, so it transfers the heat evenly to the pallet fork. And once the shellac softens, I can use tweezers to push against the adjustment lever and move the stone. In this case, the entry stone only needs to move 2/100th of a millimeter, which sounds easy until you remember that 2/100th of a millimeter is barely anything. But that tiny adjustment brings the drop lock and slide into much better shape. Sometimes that's all it takes. 2/100th of a millimeter. Now I can move the pallet fork over to my bench block, which is nice and cold, and let it cool down. And I can test it to make sure that the shellac has hardened. And put it back in and see if the engagement is better. That's definitely better. But after putting the pallet fork back in, I noticed something else. There's too much vertical play. So I'm going back to the Hoya tool one more time. The goal is to give the fork enough freedom to move cleanly without letting it wander around vertically. That tiny amount is all it takes. And with that adjusted, I'm liking what I'm seeing. With the movement where I want it, we can move to something much easier to see. The case. The movement loses energy, but a case loses geometry. And restoring a watch like this means finding both. The Monaco case is all about sharp lines, flat surfaces, and crisp transition between brushed and polished finishes. Before I can finish a case, I need to rebuild some of the damaged areas with spot welding. Once there is enough material back on the case, I can grind and lap the surfaces back into shape. For this restoration, I'm using a new belt grinder from TR Maker. It has a precision lapping table that is extremely useful for this kind of work, and this is pretty sweet. They laser engraved my logo right on the lapping table, which does not make the case any easier to restore, but it does make me feel more like a professional while I slowly question my decisions. Most people notice the polish. Watch lovers notice the geometry. Every brush surface, every polished chamfer, every transition between them defines the surface beside it. Round over one edge and the whole design starts to disappear. So this has to be slow. And honestly, slow is exactly how it should be. The goal is not to make this look like a new watch. The goal is to make it look like a Monaco again. Once I get the lines and transitions the way I want, I move over to my lapping wheel with some lapping paper to really make the polished edges pop. Now that we know that we have corrected all of the problems, I want everything to go together one final time. Clean, properly lubricated, and without any debris or handling marks left from all the adjustment work. Before the final cleaning, I'm giving the train wheel pivots one last polish. Every little bit of friction we can remove is energy the movement gets to keep. While the movement is going through the cleaning machine, I want to take a moment to thank my Patreon supporters. Your support helps make restorations like this possible. It helps with rare parts, specialized tools, and the time it takes to keep going until the watch is actually right. A special thanks goes out to Dave, Brett, Christian, John, Brendan, McGeezer, Ken, Daniel, Harold and Lisa, Steve, Larry, Mole, Kevin, Ibsy, Andy, Larry, Kale, Michael, Ronnie, Sneak the Wolf, and Ed Z. Thank you for supporting me in the Watchmaker Studio. Projects like this really would not be possible without you. And if you have not already, please consider subscribing. It is a huge help to the channel, and if you are enjoying the restoration, giving the video a like helps YouTube show it to more people. Thanks. And now comes one of my favorite parts. For the first time since this restoration began, there are no more mysteries left to solve. At least I hope there are no more mysteries left to solve. This watch has made me cautious. Now it is careful assembly, proper lubrication, and making sure every part goes back exactly where it belongs. So now that the clutch wheel and winding pinion are in place, we can begin by putting in the hour hammer. Now, as far as lubrication goes, my philosophy is if it slides, it gets grease. If it spins, it gets oil. So you're going to see a lot of the same sort of oil here. The blue stuff is grease, 9504 grease. You see red, that is HP 1300 oil. Now, this yoke is integrated with the yoke spring. It's all one piece, which is a pretty nice design. And there is that wonderful piece that we made earlier. So pretty. All right, and here we have the setting lever. And then the setting lever spring goes in. Now this very long big spring here is actually the day corrector spring. That was the minute wheel, and this is the day corrector and the day corrector spring. Now this is the intermediate minute recording wheel that interacts with the minute recording wheel on the other side of the watch. Now we'll install the center wheel and the center wheel bridge. Now one additional component I'm replacing during the final assembly is what Seiko calls the complete barrel with arbor and mainspring. With all the damage that this watch had, there's no way I was going to keep the original mainspring. However, finding a mainspring for a Seiko 7016 is nearly impossible today. But after a lot of searching, I was able to find this new old stock complete assembly. That's actually how Seiko intended the barrel, arbor, and mainspring to be replaced. So this is the way. This is the intermediate hour recording wheel. And this little lever holds it in place. Put in the escape wheel and the minute recording wheel. And now we'll put in the third wheel and pinion. And the second recording wheel. So after we put on the lower plate for chronograph bridge and the chronograph bridge, we can screw it all down. Now this is called the balance stop lever, but it doesn't really stop the balance, so I'm not sure why it's called that. It actually stops and starts the chronograph, so I would think they would call it a chronograph stop lever, but what the heck do I know? Now this is the operating lever spring. Now that hammer click interacts with the hammer, and you have to ensure that there's a small post in the bottom of the hammer that it fits into that groove of the hammer click. Now this is the pillar wheel. And now we'll get the click in place. And finally, the operating lever. The chronograph adds another layer of complexity because starting, stopping, and resetting introduce additional loads into the movement. Now, if you ever have the pleasure of working on a 7016, here's something to look out for. This barrel and train wheel bridge is a bit unwieldy. There are quite a few things that have to be in exactly the right place, or this sucker is never going to go on correctly. The click has to be out of the way. The pillar wheel has to be all the way down. The hammer has to be latched onto the hammer click and pushed fully into place. And the pivots for the third wheel, escape wheel, and minute recording wheel all have to land in the respective holes. So like I said, not the easiest bridge to install. But on top of all that, see this guy right here? That is the operating lever for starting and stopping the chronograph. And that sucker can be a bit of a pain. Right now, it is sitting where it belongs, on the side of the pillar wheel. Remember that, because it has a tendency to move when you're not looking. I'll let you listen in on my inner monologue while I do this. Okay, let's get the bridge on here. Let's Make sure all these pivots are in all of the jewels. Trying to get everything in place. Is the escape wheel in the jewel hole? Yeah, there seems to be a lot of play though. That's weird. What's happening? Stuff just isn't laying right here. Maybe it's a third wheel. Let me look. The third wheel. It looks really loose. Like it's not being held in by anything. Like there's no pressure on it. Something is keeping it from falling into place. Wait a minute. That darn thing better not have. Son of a... So as you can see, that operating lever can be a real pain. And this public service announcement was brought to you by the Watchmaker Studio. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now with the gear train installed, I can check that everything turns freely before continuing. And I'm checking each function carefully. After everything this movement has put us through, I am not assuming anything. Okay, let's get the ratchet wheel on here. And the second reduction wheel with the reverse threaded screw. And now we'll put on the barrel and train wheel bridge holder clip. By the way, if you've never played with silly putty, because my son asked me about this, like how do you clean the Rodico? This is how you clean the Rodico, because this is how you clean silly putty. I remember that. You just stretch it out, keep stretching it out, and it'll just, all the dirt will go into it and it'll be clean. So now we're going to go ahead and oil the jewel with some 9010 oil. And then I put the pallet fork into some one dip to get it nice and cleaned up before you put it back in the watch. Let's get the pallet bridge on here. Give it a little bit of a wind and check to make sure the power is getting all the way to the pallet fork. Looks good. And let's get the balance wheel on here. And it kicks right up. Looks good. Now, one of my Patreons asked me about taking off these Diashock springs, if there was a trick to it. Well, what's interesting is that they actually sell tools to do this, and I have it, and I always forget to use it. Because for me, it's just easier just to use the tweezers and that old oiler I have. But, you know, the key is really to be gentle. You press down too hard, it's not going to go well. Just really light touch. Works every time. Just put it in smoothly, twist it around, Works every time. Now I put the balance jewel into the 1-dip solution to get it cleaned up. And then we'll check it, make sure it's clean, looks clean. And then we're going to put a drop of 9010 oil right on it. And then we'll put the chaton on top of it, and it will be held together by capillary action. And then we'll get it back in the watch. And same thing getting it back on. Light touch. And now I'm going to oil the same points on the other side of the watch. So again, the escape wheel, the third wheel, and then the center wheel. And now the lower balance jewel setting. So now I'm going to oil the pallet stones with Mobius 9415 grease, which is special grease that's made for pallet stones. I'm putting some on the exit stone and then running 5 teeth of the escape wheel through, putting another drop on, and then 5 more. And I'll do that 3 times because there's 15 teeth, and then I'll run them all through. Now I had to remove the balance cock and balance wheel in order to oil the pallet stones, so now we just put it back in. Now this is the hour recording wheel. And this is the date driving wheel. And we're going to put the cannon pinion on. And this is a result of all that work. Seiko movements from this period usually run at a lower amplitude than comparable Swiss movements. In the dial down positions, somewhere around 250 to 260 degrees is already a very respectable result. They're rarely much higher than that. And this one is a 285. That's pretty great. You know, after the missing jewel, the barrel fit, the hairspring, the escape wheel jewel, the pallet engagement, the drop lock adjustment, and everything else this movement needed, I'm extremely happy with that. You know, the energy's finally going where it belongs. So that's great. The beat error is low in all positions, and at the end of the day, we've got a delta of about 7 seconds, which is great. Anything less than 10 seconds, I'm happy with. Right now, it's got a mean rate of losing 5 seconds a day, but I will adjust that out. Now with the movement performing better than I expected, we can continue with the remaining assembly. At this point, the difficult work is finished. Now it's the calendar, final checks, and getting the movement ready to return to the case. And yes, I'm still checking everything as I go, because this is not the watch where you say, I'm sure it's fine, and then move on with your life. After putting on the hour wheel and the intermediate date wheel, we'll put on the date jumper. And now we're going to put on the date dial. The date finger. The date dial guard. The day jumper. And the day finger. And now the day star with dial disc. We just need to check everything. And finally, we'll hold it all down with a snap for day star with dial disc. Now this is a holding ring for the dial. And now we get to the most visible replacement in the entire restoration, the dial. The original dial is not lightly aged. It's not charming patina. It's damaged. Normally, I prefer to preserve original dials whenever it is reasonably possible. But there's a point where preserving originality just means preserving damage. I know replacement dials can be controversial with vintage collectors, and I understand why. But I'm not replacing a good original dial just to make the watch look newer. I'm replacing a ruined dial so you can tell the time. Kind of an important feature. Now I'll get the hands on here, ensuring to get the hands to turn over the date at close to midnight as possible. Now this holder that I have is actually pretty important because when you're setting the chronograph seconds wheel and the minute and hour, you have to actually hold down the chronograph button. So it's helpful to have that holder. All right, that's pretty close. That was pretty close to midnight. Okay, let's get the second hand on here. As you can see, I'm holding that button down while I put the seconds, hour, and minutes for the chronograph on. That's how you ensure that when you hit the reset, it goes right back to 12 exactly. Now, when putting on the oscillating weight for the automatic, Seiko recommends that you align the arrow on the oscillating weight to the circle on the first reduction wheel, and that ensures the maximum efficiency. Before the movement goes back into the case, there are still a few less glamorous parts to deal with. The case tubes need to be installed, the crystal needs to be replaced, and the gaskets need to be renewed. The polished case and dial are what everyone notices, but these small sealing components are what help protect all the work inside. Restoration can't just look good, it's got to function properly too. Now I'm putting the gaskets inside this container that has 2 sponges with silicone in it, and that's to help lubricate the gaskets. First we'll put the gaskets where the pushers go. Now, if you've never had the pleasure of putting in a pusher and putting the clip on, it's kind of a pain. So that's why I made this tool that actually I flattened the edge on it and I put a slit in it so that it would hold the clip. And I gotta say, it has made a world of difference because I would spend quite a lot of time chasing that darn clip. Now let's get the gasket on the stem. Let's put the gasket that goes around the dial. And now we are finally ready to put the movement back where it belongs. And yes, there were a few moments where I looked at this thing and thought, you asked for this. The missing jewel, the hairspring, the barrel, the escapement, the case, and of course a tiny lever I had to make because apparently buying one would have been way too easy. But this is also why I love these projects. You start with a watch that looks like it may have had enough, and one problem at a time, it starts becoming a watch again. The movement's running better than I expected. The case has its geometry back. The dial finally looks like it belongs in a Monaco. And for the first time since this project started, I don't see another problem waiting for me. Which, with this watch, feels suspicious, but I'm going to take the win. The Seiko Monaco is finally finished. Well, I had a good time. If you enjoyed it too, hit that subscribe button. And I will see you next time here in the Watchmaker Studio.